And outside of COVID, what are the pressures upon young people today? And what can parents and carers do to help and look out for any red flags? Well, to discuss, I'm joined by Everett O'Donoghue, a young people's mental health champion, Nancy Murfield from the Suffolk Young People's Health Project, and Humphreys from the Suffolk Parent Carer Network, Dr. Beth Mosley from the Norfolk and Suffolk NHS Foundation Trust, and Sarah Clark from Kooth, which is an online mental wellbeing community. Let me just say to everybody, you can feed in your questions. Just hover at the bottom of your screen and type in your question. It comes up in our little feed here and we can ask the panel. So Everett, to open up with you, afternoon to you, what is a young people's mental health champion? What do you do?
Sorry, we're struggling to unmute there. Hi, okay, so my role's a bit sort of strange because it's new. It's recently been created, or at least revamped. But effectively, it's very much a developmental role for a person with lived experiences of the services that they'll be informing on. So I've had a lot of experience of mental health services as a service user. So I'm sort of employed to use that lived experience and utilize it to help sort of advocate and raise up and co-produce the voices of other young people like myself that maybe gone through similar things or are currently going through similar things, and sort of, you know, like I said, co-produced projects with them, help like kind of it's difficult because there's so many elements of it, but yeah, advocate and help inform change, and just sort of, yeah, just I'm in a lot of meetings about transformation, and how we can best use lived experience to inform that going forward, and sort of seek out any blind spots that we have in there. So that's a little bit of what I do. I'm always terrible at explaining it.
No, you're not terrible at explaining it at all. You say it's a new role, or a relatively new role. So you come into this role, what's the first thing, based on your lived experience, that you either want to change or make better or, you know, adapt or tweak?
Oh, that is a tough one, especially if I'm allowed to be candid.
You are.
Gosh, everything. I guess, wow, the first thing, honestly, just really embedding that like service user perspective in all levels at all stages of mental health care, and not just as an afterthought or as a token sort of tick box voice, like embedding it so thoroughly that you know that when you're going into a service, you know that someone that's used it has okayed this situation, and that there are people like us looking out for current and future service users alike, and that you can recognize that. So that would be like obviously my first and foremost, but if we go into it, there's so many things to cover. I think that everybody knows that we have a lot of issues in mental health services in the UK in general, and it's not just Norfolk and Suffolk, but there are many things, wait lists being one, diversity and inclusion and understanding of that, communication. I could list things for days, but that's a little bit of an overview, and I'm sure there's other people on this panel that can speak on that.
Sure. When you say, you know, making sure there's no sort of token gestures, is it that it's a bit too broad at the minute then? That somebody that has some challenges, it's you know, that it's not specialist enough? Is that what you're saying?
What do you mean by that exactly? Sorry.
So if you've got a challenge, is the system set up to be able to tackle your individual challenge, or is it actually, you know, very broad? Just referring back to what you said about, you know, kind of like a token, like it's a token gesture, I think was the words that you used.
Yeah, I guess I was speaking like mostly about participation, like how we utilize the lived experience voice to inform the creation and readjustment of services and the transformation of them. But if you're asking in a broader sense, are the services themselves set up for more individual sort of voices? I would say at current a controversial no. I think that another massive part that I wanted to tackle coming into this role was lack of awareness of things like microaggressions and intersectionality. People that have several difficulties or in play at once, or several like different,
Mm,
protected characteristics that are at play, and how like we don't really yet have the language embedded in services to like respectfully speak to these people at times.
okay.
Um, so yeah, I don't think it's fully. I don't think we're there yet, but I do think that things like this are incredibly important, and the fact that I'm allowed and invited here to speak
Mm.
to to you on behalf of service users is really really valuable.
Well, I know you've spoken publicly in the past, and you've talked about
Have.
young with special needs as being labelled as, either just being difficult or attention seeking. How
hmm
detrimental to someone's life is it when things are just brushed away or excused away? And tell me, as someone who, as you say, has experience in these issues yourself.
Oh gosh, absolutely detrimental. Yeah, you're right. I have spoken about this before. And where to start with that? It's incredibly invalidating. Like it really it's like I try to put this across in other meetings. It's not something that affects the young person just then and there and gives them like a an what's the word like an adverse effect in the moment. Like it's something that we carry with us for the rest of our, not just experience of mental health service, but the rest of our lives, until we get the proper treatment to undo that sort of behavior. Um and like you said about people like with lived experience of uh disabilities. I myself am autistic, and the the things I've heard um, uh, when sort of approaching me in the UK with with approaching my care because they see that label are so detrimental. Like I said, things like this, service users, children, young people, anyone really carries these these words with them in their head for a very long time. It's not
Mm,
something that just goes away.
mm,
Um, and we're already such a largely misunderstood cohort of young people, people with like additional learning needs and autism spectrum conditions. Um, and so to have that sort of, oh, you're too difficult to help mentality, it's just not good enough. So yeah, that's what I'd answer to that.
Let's bring in Nancy at this point. So Nancy Murfield from the Suffolk Young People's Health Project, 4YP, as it's better known as, which is a local
Yeah.
charity and which helps young people. Hi, Nancy. Is this something that you see when you work with young people today? Frustrations that special needs aren't fully understood.
Absolutely. And I spend a lot of time talking to parents. Are you going to be able to help my child? And I always come back with, we're going to do the best to hear what your child is saying. We're going to do the best to hear what you were saying to support in the best way that we can, whether it's through our counseling service or through our youth work services. And I loved listening to Everett talk about the need for inclusion and understanding and training,
Mm,
because I think we get in our roles and we kind of stay there, and sometimes we forget to learn, sometimes we forget to read, sometimes we forget to listen. So it's definitely something that we do see, certainly I see when I work with children, young people and their families.
what sort of tangible things can be done now to make sure that young people are listened to and engaged with?
For me, the most important thing that we can do is actually sit and listen, and actually spend a little bit of time and being really open to hearing what people are saying, and actually sometimes what they're not saying. When one of the things that I had an experience, actually a couple of experiences in the last couple of days with young people who are really quiet and really shy and really withdrawn. And it's really easy for somebody to dismiss that really quiet, shy young person as, oh, they're too hard to work with, they're too hard to engage with, so we're just not gonna. And instead of, okay, you might not want to ask that question. Well, let's talk about something else. So those are the things that are easy wins. How can we, because it's my role, that's my job, to go in and really try to engage that young person, and also, and hear from the families as well. What has your experience been? What has worked in the past? What has not worked in the past? What would you like it to look like? And really trying to hear that. And sometimes when you ask those questions, I tend to get a lot of I don't knows. And that's okay too. I love the I don't knows, because that to me just gives me a way in. So we can really work with that I don't know. And with families as well. I don't know, because I think a lot of doors have been shut. And I agree with Everett as well, that there's a lot of work to be done within our mental health system. In the UK, we've got a lot of work to do. But I think, sitting here on this panel, I think we're a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And for parents or for carers listening to this right now, and they may have young people in their households that they want to help but don't know where to start, what is the first step, and what are the signs to look for? This is complicated stuff, isn't it?
It's really complicated. And one of the interesting things, I've just been doing a little bit of work, putting together some training. And when we start to look at signs and symptoms, they kind of cross so many different things. So it might be somebody who is struggling with self-harm. It might be somebody who's just turning into a teenager. And so the kind of the hormonal changes that happen. So it is really complicated. And I always tell people, parents, your children best. You know your children best. So what's shifted and what's changed, and encourage parents to ask questions as well. And I'm a little bit loud and sassy, so sometimes I can push a little bit, maybe where a parent can't push as much. But for parents, just be curious. Ask your children. Talk to your children. Sit down at the dinner table. Have dinner together. And those kinds of things for me. And I know it's been really hard this last year. Everyone's been crammed together. So maybe we don't want to have dinner together, but still be curious. Be curious about your children. If something doesn't look right, or something doesn't feel right, and something doesn't sound right, question it. And sometimes they aren't going to want to talk to you. And I know Ann does a lot of, she's my parent. I'm sitting here looking at Ann, with parents and carers, and yeah, I just always encourage parents and carers, ask the question and reach out. So, you can reach out to us. If we don't have the answer, or we're not the right service, we will signpost you. We will guide you to the right place. Ask at school. And there's a wealth of knowledge on the internet, but it can be really hard to drill down the bit that you really need. So, reach out to places like us, reach out to places like Kooth, the NSFT and the Emotional Wellbeing Hub and the Wellbeing Service. All those websites have really great things. And there's a really great website for young people called The Source. And on The Source, there is any number of, you want to know something, go there, and it will link you to lots of great things.
This is great. So many places to go to. But as you say, some of the problem is finding your way through it. And we'll talk with Anne about that in just a minute. But bringing in Dr. Beth Mosley at this point, because I know that you do a lot of work helping parents understand more about young people's mental health. And you describe it as an upskilling. So talk to me about that. How do we, as parents or carers, upskill ourselves?
Well, yeah, as you've highlighted, as in response to the pandemic, really, we recognise so many more parents will be asking questions about their own children's well-being and wondering how much is this a normal response to the distress and the anxiety we're experiencing, and lots of opportunity for young people to engage in the things that are really important to them. We know that if you can't do the things that are important to you, the natural consequence is your mood is going to drop and you're going to have a mood. And parents over this last 6 months to a year have really had to be the main kind of source of support for their young people, because they haven't had necessarily extended family members or school to provide that support, or other organisations and other agencies which have maybe not been able to be as available as they might have been before. So we started running virtual parent workshops on really important topics like anxiety, like low mood, like managing uncertainty. How do we all manage this uncertainty, not just our children and how they're experiencing, but that how we're experiencing it as adults. And our training is very much helping parents kind of think about their own experiences as well of anxiety or low mood. For all of us, these are things that happen as part of being human beings, and then thinking about how they can put themselves in their children's shoes a little bit more. So our workshops are all an hour long, and what we do is we just give them some of that real science behind anxiety or low mood, but in a really accessible, non-techno language way. We talk a lot about us as parents and our experiences as parents going through the lockdown and the way that that's affected our relationship or our behaviour of our children. And then we think about what can we do as parents in response to that based on what we know works in research. If we were providing a service, for example, so for example, if you're working with a young person with low mood, we know there are certain evidence base of working, and what we'll do is we'll share those with parents so they have an understanding of what are the things to support your children to do more of and the things to encourage them to do less of. So a good example of that would be with low mood. We know if you do less of the things that are important to you, your mood will reduce, your energy levels will reduce. And one of the key ways to support that and to move people away from that low mood place is to get them doing the things that are important to them again before they've got the energy, because often we think, oh, when I feel better, when I've got more energy, that's when I'll go back to doing the things that are important to me. And what we know is if you do those things, despite having a lack of energy or wanting to do them, we know that doing them actually starts to help you give that energy and you can break that cycle. And of course, as parents, we're faced with decisions every day, aren't we? Do I let my child not go to football because they're feeling really low, or do I really support and encourage them to go? And it just helps, I think, parents think about ways that they can kind of create those opportunities for young people to not get stuck into some of those traps that we know that anxiety and low mood particularly can get us stuck in. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, we're hearing that there's some great resource available to people. And as I said a minute ago, it's often just finding that resource, isn't it? Let's bring in Anne Humphreys from Suffolk Parent Carer Network. Hi there, Anne. Tell us what you do and how it helps.
So hi, Tom. So I'm co-chair of Suffolk Parent Carer Network, and we provide peer-to-peer support to families who have got a child or young person aged between 0 and 25 with any additional need or disability. That's whether they've got a diagnosis or not. But the main part of our work is working across education, health and care services to make sure that the services that are provided for those children, young people and families are fit for purpose and meet the needs of those families across the whole of Suffolk.
We've all heard about people being moved from, you know, to use the old phrase, from pillar to post, or from slipping through the system. Are things getting better? Are all of the different agencies and groups working cohesively more so now, or are parents still pretty bewildered?
So I think that it's varied, if I'm honest, Tom. So we still do have too many families who are, we call it ping-ponged around the system. So they go to one door and are told that they don't meet the criteria for that service, and then they go to another, etc. And you just end up going around in circles, and it makes things much worse for families when they're already under stress, when they're already trying to just find the help to support their child or young person. But I do think that with some of the work that we've been doing during the pandemic, along with Beth and Nancy and others, that we have been able to begin to think about how we are more joined up. But that will take time to embed. But I am hopeful that moving forward with our mental health transformation, that things will improve. But as it stands at the minute, we know that we've got big issues accessing services in the first place. And we know that the numbers of referrals to the Emotional Wellbeing Hub have increased significantly, and that there is a large waiting list. So even trying to get into the services for that very first step, even having a conversation is really challenging at the minute for families.
And I know that your part of your remit is to challenge the current provision, and mental health has been so much more in the spotlight over the past few years, probably more so in the last 12 months than at any other time. So, does it get the resource that it needs?
So, you're right. We do provide challenge, and people on this call have sat in meetings with us where we have challenged quite vigorously and do most of the time. I think that there is certainly more investment than there was, but is there enough? No, not yet. And actually, the reality is that statutory services will never be able to meet the needs of everybody that requires services. So one of the things that we've been looking at, which is how we've been working with 4YP and others, is how our voluntary and community services can provide support to children, young people and families, because that is going to be a big part of the way going forward. But basically we still have a lot of work to do in the system to make it better, and too many families are not getting the support that they need.
Okay, well, we're getting a number of questions coming through, which is great. If you hover on your screen and click the Q&A, then you can post a question too. From a lot of parents and carers, actually, just sort of asking for some advice. We'll get to that in just a second. But let's bring in Sarah Clark from Kooth. I love the name of this, Sarah. Tell me more. What is it?
Hi, Tom. So Kooth actually was young people named it. And it's kind of a spin-off of young people thought that they were always known as being uncouth. So that's how it was born. It was back in 2001. So it just stuck. So
brilliant.
Yeah.
I really love it. I was looking at some of the videos on there earlier on, and there's some great stuff on there.
Yeah.
From what from what you understand though, Sarah, from all of the interactions that young people have on the platform, what are they telling you? What are the key things that are coming through right now?
I think at the moment one of the biggest things is they're feeling lots of anxiety and stress. Across Suffolk, that's our highest reported difficulty. But in terms of how they use Kooth, actually they're using it more than ever in various different ways, from wanting more and more of our activities that we do online, and wanting more and more of things like podcasts that we do as well. So not just about the counselling, actually we're having lots of young people who are wanting to share their experiences and their stories, and wanting to help other young people with, so sleep issues is also another thing that's been shared by young people across Suffolk, but others are actually sharing their stories and helping within their peers.
And I guess the huge benefit is, as you just sort of touched on, there is this community that can talk now in a safe place. People aren't on their own.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, since we launched in Suffolk, we've had 31,000 logins into Kooth just from our young people. And that is all about the community. Yes, we do have online counsellors available to be, for young people to speak to. But we also have a huge community that young people massively engage with, and the live forums that we do every week, they absolutely love it. Online Christmas parties and, stuff like that. And I think that is actually the draw for young people, is that it's their peers supporting them as well.
And I see on the system that you can sort of tick the smiley face of your choice depending on your mood, which I guess has given some quite interesting insight and trends perhaps over the last year. What's COVID done in terms of an impact on young people using the platform?
Yeah, it has had a huge increase. Actually, our biggest increase was in January this year. We saw the biggest increase in use. But yeah, what you're talking about with the smiley faces and emojis, that's the journal that they can do. They can create their own journals, which actually has proved invaluable really in COVID. Lots of young people have logged on at different times of the day and night in order to be able to just write down what they're thinking and what they're feeling. And I'd say with COVID, one of the biggest things that we found is loneliness is a huge share from young people. And what they've been seeking when they've been coming online is to connect with others that have been feeling similar things, really.
I'm just going to sort of bring some questions in right now. This one is for Everett, and it's from Claire, who says, what signs are there that a young person is reaching out for help, but probably not in an obvious way? What might be the signs? I suppose the question is, what's the stuff that the young person isn't saying?
That's a really difficult one, because I can't speak on behalf of every young person of every possible diagnosis or disability or any or background, and every single young person is going to be different. So I guess I would echo sort of some of what I think Nancy said, of like, if you're paying attention and you're listening and you know them, you'll be able to tell what your specific young person, like your specific daughter, son, or anywhere in between is that their mood is changing. Maybe that some signs that we've seen are speak up less in in family conversations, don't tell you about their day as much, maybe are a bit more secretive about their feelings. It's super hard to pinpoint because everybody masks differently. Maybe retreating from their friends, not seeing them as much. Bringing up new ideas, or it's talking about things that they've not talked about before. And yeah, I'm not sure, because it's super difficult to have an individualistic response to that, because everybody's super different.
Yeah, but a number of signs covered off there. Thank you. Jane has a question for Nancy. How do you strike the balance as a parent to understand what is happening, but not invade the privacy of the child, which could make things worse? No one wants to feel like they're being watched all the time. I can kind of, get that. If you're a parent or a carer and you're maybe sort of being perceived as intrusive, what's the balance, do you think?
Wow, that's a hard question. Thanks. I think it
Thanks,
really.
Jane.
Thanks, Jane. Yeah, she gave me the hard question. It is a really hard balance to strike, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say sometimes you're going to get it wrong, and sometimes you have to be open, and you have to communicate as a family to really find the balance. And I think some of it is pushing. Just like your young person, your child or young person is going to push boundaries as they start to want independence. I think it's that kind of little creep in to push how far. And if you get stuck, ask questions, reach out for help as a parent. Anne mentioned, peer support. That's really important. Reach out and ask questions from other parents, because you will not be the only one, Jane. I promise you are not the only one who's trying to find that balance between how do I push and how do I really show my caring. So slowly and gently. You might get it wrong, and that's okay, because that's how we learn things. But also reach out and ask other parents as well. And it's really easy for me to sit here and go, oh, don't be afraid to ask. It is a really hard thing to ask for some help, but do reach out, because there will be people who will listen to you and will guide you if they don't know the answer for you.
Another question, I'm going to put this to Beth and then to Anne. And as a parent or carer, it can be extremely difficult for us too. We may feel guilt, we may feel anxiety. How do we help our own mental health? So, Beth.
So I think all the advice we give to parents is very much about actually looking after themselves first and foremost, before they even go to looking after their family, because we can't pour from an empty bucket. So it's really thinking about getting those basics right. So making sure that you as a parent are getting enough good quality sleep, you're eating well enough, and you've got those structures and routines in your day that kind of give you that continuity to keep you motivated and going. And then thinking about those small and simple pleasures or opportunities to get support from people around us. So it could be going for a walk with your dog and making sure you fit that in every day, especially now the weather's better and you get some outside time. We know outside time is really important for our well-being, our children's well-being. Doing some kind of exercise. We know exercise is absolutely critical to helping us release those stress hormones and actually produce good, feel good hormones as well. But not going crazy, of course. If you don't normally run, don't start taking up marathons, but just integrating some of those activities in your day, so you're not just spending the whole day giving, but you're also thinking about your own well-being. So relaxation time, just giving yourself some space at the end of the day. It's very difficult if you're working, if you're looking after children, if you're looking after a partner or grandparents. You know, we are often as parents stuck in caregiving roles, and it's exhausting. And we do have to think about looking after ourselves first and foremost. In terms of the advice and what Nancy was talking about, how to get the balance right with regard to responding to our children's need for independence and privacy, and also us being available and responsive as parents. The workshops that we've done are on lots of topics, including communicating with adolescents, and they're all on YouTube. So if you ever feel like you'd like to know a little bit more, then you can go to the NSFT YouTube channel and you can find all of our workshops there. And lots of these things that we're talking about today are talked about in more detail.
Okay, thank you. And build on that, if you will, Anne. The question was, you know, how do parents or carers keep their own mental health, you know, online if they're dealing with what are challenging situations that they may not be used to?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So Beth's absolutely right with all of her suggestions. What's quite challenging for families often, parents and carers particularly in a caring role, is finding time for yourself. And so I would say, don't worry about having to carve out half an hour or an hour. If you get 5 minutes several times a day, that's okay. And sometimes it can be just as simple as our families tell us, as frankly locking yourself in the bathroom for 5 minutes, just to breathe and be able to do something, think about something else, or going out in your garden if you've got one, you know. But the other thing is, it's really important to, as Nancy said, reach out to other parents and carers. So whether that's ourselves, whether that's other support groups that exist in Suffolk, do reach out, because you will find that you aren't alone. And a lot of our parents get a lot of support from our social media, so from our Facebook groups, because, you know, you're talking to other parent carers who will give you advice all of the time about how to look after yourself. But Beth is right, you know, we do have to, it's really difficult to, but we do have to try and look after ourselves in order to be able to look after our children and young people.
Okay. This is a question to Sarah, and she says, how do I direct young people to Kooth?
It's simply just directing them to the website, kooth.com. Young people don't need to be referred to our service, and they can access it independently. Lots of organisations can access free training from me as well on an in-depth tour around Kooth. So I'm happy to share my email. If anyone wants to contact me, they can. And yeah, literally just young people go to kooth.com, and we are a website, not an app. So always have to mention that, because lots of professionals will say, oh, have a look in the app store, but we're not there. So it's a website. Yeah, literally just go to kooth.com.
Thank you. Charlotte Wilcott says, I'm a student support manager in a post-16 educational setting. She goes on to talk in this email here about noticing that the referral times are growing, are stretching. Talks about signposting learners to apps such as Kooth and Me Too, which have been invaluable, but goes on to ask, are there any other services that we can also access? Is there anything else out there? I'll put this to all of you that would be very useful. Anybody want to kick that off? No? Okay. Well, we'll have a think about that and come back to you, I think, separately. Thank you, Charlotte. We've got a hand up, Anne.
I was just going to say that there are some other online services that that the young people could go to. So Young Minds have a good website. As was already been mentioned, The Source have got a good website with lots of tips and hints. And also for parents and carers, there's the Minded website, which gives lots of information. It was co-written by practitioners and parents and carers, gives lots of information and tips on how to support young people. And I think that there, you know, it is again about young people being able to reach out and have those conversations. We know that Kooth has got capacity, you know, plenty of capacity to be able to support young people. And the hub, you know, it is struggling. There is no getting away from that. It is struggling with the amount of referrals that it's got. But I think if any school staff out there are worried, increasingly worried about their children or young people, please do go back to the hub. Please don't sit and wait. But also there are the mental health in schools teams that you might be able to link up with along with Beth's team. So there are several options.
I've got a few I can suggest, which what we do have is a lot of voluntary sector organisations that don't necessarily work across the whole of Suffolk, but they are working in pockets. So I can name a few if that's helpful. So if you live in the Felixstowe area, there's Level 2, and that's a service which is free, and that involves mentoring and some counselling for 11 plus young people. They also have a youth hub with drop-in activities. And then if you're looking for something in sort of central Suffolk in Stowmarket area, then we've got The Mix. And again, they've got coaching support, and they also take referrals for other kinds of counselling and mentoring support there. So there's a couple of areas that could be helpful depending on where you're living in Suffolk.
Thank you. I think there's been a number of websites and different organisations that have been referred to over the last half an hour. We'll do our best to kind of assemble a list, I think, and get it up on the East Anglian Daily Times website or in the paper.
We have made a list, actually. If I can send you that, and it's literally got everything under different topics. So for parents or for you know, things around finances as well. So I can share that with you if you'd like, and you could share that with everybody.
Right. That would be really useful. We've got time, I think, for one more question, and this goes back to what we were saying earlier on about, you know, how can you help a teenager who won't tell you what's wrong, even if you can't coax it out of them. If it's just a blank wall, you know, a brick wall, what do you do? How do you talk to them? Nancy, you've popped up on my screen here. This looks like one for you.
So that was a really tricky one, and I love those. I love when they say, I don't want to talk to you. And it's just really encouraging. I always really encourage parents to say, okay, well, who will they talk to? And also you can't always push it. Like I can't make you talk to me. And it's leaving the doors of communication wide open in your house, whether it's using words or write me a note or send me a text or send me an instant message or FaceTime me from your room. You know, all of those are different ways that I've heard family members really share that's how they opened up. And sometimes they don't want to talk to you. Sometimes they want to talk to their friends. You know, that's like that's where they want to go. And for some young people, that gets really small. And I see Everett's hand because I'm sure Everett has a much better answer than I do. But that's kind of how I encourage people, is just to leave everything open. Sometimes it won't be words that they're going to share, but it might be a picture or it might be a text. So just parents, really, family members, caregivers, just be open to that.
Okay, Everett, build on that for us.
Oh, yeah, no, I wasn't going to say that I had a better answer at all. I was actually going to kind of go off of your answer there, Nancy, and I completely agree what you say about keeping things open. And I think sometimes, like, from my experience of sort of being in that position and not wanting to talk, I think that it is about the things that you don't say, like, as well. So, like, you have to do the work outside of just approaching, like, for example, like, I guess if they're on like TikTok or something, they're on Instagram, or, you know, like they are already accessing some sort of community that you're not a part of and you don't really understand. like you utilize the time that you have not talking about their issues on showing like an active and non-condescending interest in the things that do seem to pique their interest and do seem to be helping them. And I really want to stress non-judgmental, because there are a lot of like we all know that there are a lot of dangers with cyberbullying and with things going on the internet, and I do not like contest that at all. But we cannot ignore, and I see this happening very, very frequently by older people, we cannot ignore the benefits of having these communities online and seeing diverse voices where you may not, especially if you're living in rural communities. They may be your only lifeline to people like you. So, you know, having that, just dropping little hints about like the fact you're interested in their lives outside of their problems, because if you don't have that communication there, you're not going to build on it starting from the most difficult point and then going backwards. You have to start from the easy stuff. So yeah, I just wanted to build on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have we got time for me just to add a little bit?
Of course we have. Beth.
So one of the things that we think a lot about is, how do you as a parent create a bit of routine in your own structure of the day to make sure you're available for young person, not in a pushy way, but just so they know you're around and you're there, and that you're open and you're in the right headspace. Because often as parents, our children, we want to talk to our children when they're stressed out. Again, that's not good. We need to give them space and time to kind of feel better within themselves before we can have those more difficult conversations. And often we're quite stressed out as well, and then we're not in the best place to offer that non-judgmental lens or that positive kind of soft body language, which will encourage our young people to be braver about opening up what might be going on for them. And so one of the things we talk about is creating kind of routines in family life where kids know you're going to be available. So for me, it's after dinner when I'm clearing up. That's a great time for my 16-year-old to know that I'm always going to be there and I'm always going to have space to listen to him. And sometimes he really uses that space and sometimes he doesn't, but he just knows it's there. And for my daughter who's 13, it will be watching something with her in the evening, which is her choice, Riverdale at the moment. Some of the stuff that I kind of was actually a bit negative about before, but now I've really got into it and realized actually Riverdale's pretty good. And then we just sit together and we watch it together, and she loves the fact I enjoy watching it with her, because normally I'm like, why are you watching that crap again? But actually instead I'm like, what's happening now? I can't wait to watch it tonight. And then that's the time when she might start opening up about the difficulties of the day. So sometimes it's those shared alongside moments where you're doing a really boring task like loading the skip, which I was doing with my son at the weekend, and he was helping me. That's when our children and adolescents are much more likely to just say, you know what, I'm finding this really difficult, and open up to us, because it's much less pressure. And just like what Everett was saying, you know, if we've got that positive interest and body language outside of those times we're asking our young people what's going on, then I think our children are going to trust that we're going to be there to listen and give them the space without judging them. Because I think what we're saying about judgment is so true. So many, all of us, if we think about any time we've disclosed how we're struggling, we're always very worried about what other people are going to think about us and feeling judged. And it's even more difficult when you're an adolescent. So being really mindful of your facial expression as a parent. Often when we're really worried, we look a bit cross, and our children will be really sensitive to that. So trying to have soft body language and a soft face, or even just saying, I look like I'm cross, I'm not cross, I'm just feeling a bit worried. So as a parent, we can say what we might be feeling rather than kind of putting that burden on our children to make sense of that, if that makes sense.